Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi Mesechet Peah. We're up to Peah Gimel Mishnah Chet. The Mishnah now is going to discuss a very interesting case. Hakotev Nechasav L'Abdo, one who writes over his assets to his slave. Yatsa Ben Choin, the slave goes free, because we know an Eved Kanaani, a non-Jewish slave, is the property of the owner. So when the owner writes a contract saying, I want all my property to go to you, included in that is the slave himself. Therefore, he acquires everything, including himself, and he goes free. However, if the owner excludes any piece of land or any item from the transaction, the slave does not go free. Meaning, Rabotai, we have two cases here. The owner owns 10 pieces of land and the slave. He goes to the slave and he tells him, I'm acquiring to you all my assets except this one piece of land. Tanakama says, slave does not go free, the whole contract is void. And we have another case where I only own two items, the slave and that one piece of land that I excluded. Let us understand the reasoning behind both these cases. In the case where I own this slave and 10 other pieces of property, and I say I want everything to go to you except this small piece of land, the Mefarshim explain, since I said I want everything to go to you, I included all my assets, but then I excluded something, maybe I'm also intending to exclude the slave, meaning that now the slave does not go free. And since anything a slave acquires goes back to the owner, all the rest of the property that I said goes to him comes back to me. And the whole reason I wrote the contract was just to flatter him, to show him, oh, look, I would give you property, but he's not actually giving it to him. In the situation where I only own a piece of land and the slave, and I exclude that piece of land, we say it's considered one sale, and just like the piece of land part of the sale was canceled because I want to keep it, so too the slave part of the sale is also canceled. It's all one sale. And since that part I don't want to keep, that means it breaks the whole contract. And therefore the slave does not go free. Rabbi Shimon says, Le'olam hu ben chorin ad she'omar harei kol nechasei netunin lishponi avdi chutz me'echad meribo shebehem. Rabbi Shimon says, no, in both cases, whether I own the slave and 10 pieces of property and excluded one, or I own just the slave and one piece of property and I excluded it, the slave goes free. Except if I say I want everything to go to my slave except 1/10,000th of my property, in that case, since I didn't specify, maybe that 1/10,000th is the Eved, and even if the value is more, I consider him only 1/10,000th. Let us see what the reasons between Rabbi Shimon's cases. Now, in the case where I have the slave and 10 other properties, and I exclude one property, I say everything belongs to you except this one property, Rabbi Shimon says, look at the words he said. He said everything goes to the slave except this property. So why do I have to assume he's including other things, he's including the slave that he wants to keep? He said he only wants to keep this property. That means everything belongs to the slave. Slave goes free. And even in the case where I have only one property and the slave, and I say I want to give you everything except this property, so I have nothing left to give you except yourself. So the Tanakama says, since I can't give you the property, that means the whole contract is canceled, because I said I want to give you everything, and if I cancel this part, the whole thing's canceled. Rabbi Shimon says we're going to do something called Paginan Dibura, which means we're going to split the contract into two pieces. There's the selling land to you, and there's the selling yourself to you. Granted, the selling land to you, I want to keep it, so we throw that piece out, but we still have one remaining contract left of freeing you. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon says, the slave, even in that case, would be free, except in a case, like we said, where I say I want everything to go to you except 1/10,000th of my property. In that case, Rabbi Shimon says, maybe the 1/10,000th that the owner said really means the slave, and he considers him to only be worth 1/10,000th of his property. That's his value according to the owner. That is the end, Rabotai, of Perek Gimel Mishnah Chet. Perek Daled now discusses how Peah is distributed to the poor people. Now, Rabotai, the pasuk says, it says, "Ubekutzachem et kitzir artzachem." When you reap the harvest of your land, lo techlet pe'at tzedakah liktzor. Don't harvest till the end of the field. Lager v'la'ani ta'azov otam. You shall leave over the rest of the produce, the corner, to the convert and to the poor person. Now, Rabotai, if you look at the lashon ta'azov, the Rav writes, ta'azov means leave it. Leave it how it is and let the poor people get it. The halakha is, the Mishnah says, Peah is left, is given to the poor people while it's still attached to the ground. And the way it works is the poor people, they compete for it. Whoever's more aggressive, whoever's more fast, they get the most. Now, Rabotai, the Mishnah says, however, there are certain exclusions. The pasuk says, Lager v'la'ani ta'azov otam, you shall leave them. Them you leave, but others you don't leave. Which cases? B'dalit ubdekel, by a tristle, grapevine, and by a date palm tree, in those two cases, the halacha is that the owner has to go up, bring down the produce, and then hand it out equally. It says, Balabait murid u'mechalek aniyim. Bedalit uvdekel, Balabait murid u'mechalek aniyim. By a tristle, grapevine, and by a date palm tree, the owner goes up, removes the produce, and hands it out equally. Why? The Mifarshim explain, in these two cases, it is very dangerous to have the poor people compete with each other, because by all other trees, let's say an apple tree, it's not so dangerous for them to climb. But by the date palm tree, it's not so. Its branches are not so wide. It has nothing to hold on to. And by the tristle grapevines, it's not a sturdy structure. Tristle grapevine is when you have the wooden structure. It's like a square, and on top you have the grapevines that intertwine. That's not so sturdy, so it's dangerous. In these cases, the Torah says, do not leave it over for the poor people. It's dangerous. Rather, go up yourself, bring it down, and then distribute it equally. Now, the halakha should have been, once I bring it down and the danger goes away, I should throw it and let the aniyim compete for it, because that's really the halakha. However, the Mefarshim explained, the rabbis made a decree that you should give it out, because we're afraid when you go up to get it and you come down, you're going to throw it to whoever poor people you want, and the other ones are going to lose out. Therefore, we say distribute it equally. Rabbi Shimon says, likewise by a walnut tree. The Mefarshim explain, chalikeh means the language of smooth. Since the trunks are smooth, it's also dangerous for them to have the poor people get it, because it's hard to climb, it's hard to go on it. So Rabbi Shimon says, these as well, the owner goes up, grabs them, and then splits them equally between the poor people. Now the Mishnah ends off, you have 100 people, 100 poor people coming to a field to collect. 99 say we want the owner to distribute it equally amongst us. One says I want to compete for it. I want all of us to have a competition for it. The halakha is listening to the one. Why? Because he is saying what the real halakha is regarding Peah. The real halakha is ta'azov them, leave them, let them compete. Since this one says let us follow the halakha how it is, we listen to him, we have them compete over it. Only by the dangerous trees, like the tristle grapevine, the date palm tree, and according to Rabbi Shimon, the walnut tree, the owner goes up, gets them down, hands them out evenly. But by everything else, the Torah says you must leave it, mechubar al-karka, have the poor person get it himself. Even if 99 people say, we want you to give it out equally, and one says no, the halakha is you have to follow that one, you have to let them compete for it. Implies from the Mishnah that if all 100 say, we want you to distribute it equally, maybe in that case, the owner would be allowed to do that. That is the end of today's Mishnah. Amen.